What's the most strangely unique punishment you ever received as a kid? How bad was it? My sisters and I would have to memorize passages from Shakespeare together. It was horrible to be fighting and then sit together for half an hour or more memorizing and reciting until my dad returned. One wrong word and he'd leave us for a while. Probably the worst part is it made me hate Shakespeare. I've had corporal punishment and all that, but this stuck out. If Shakespeare knew his works would be used to torture kids in school, right before he died he'd be like, frick this crap, and put all of it into a fire. My best friend and I snuck out and walked to the nearby convenience store late at night in 6th grade. My father made me write a 20-page research paper on Watergate. I have no idea why he chose the topic, but the knowledge has come in handy many times in my life. I had to kneel facing a wall while pulling my ears, and if my ears weren't red enough when they came to check on me then I had to stay there even longer. Didn't have to pull my ear, but one time I was sent to the corner and on my knees. My mom went to a neighbor's house and forgot I was there. I fell asleep. I now can fall asleep in weird, uncomfortable places. It's like my crappy superpower. In high school my friend got caught smoking weed by his mom. His punishment was that he had to tell his 95-year-old strictly religious great-grandmother, who thinks weed is just as bad as H. My parents would make my older brother and sister choose one of the encyclopedias, turn to a random page, and start copying everything down until my parents told them to stop. My dad made us all go to the back of a 45-minute line at the theme park because I was being impatient and bratty. Would do similar things. If anyone complained about dinner or how long it took to cook, they would eat after everyone else. Forced to smell dog breath. Because if we have to deal with the filth from your mouth, you have to deal with the filth from its mouth. It sounds funny, and it is funny looking back on it, but good god it was not funny then. I begged for almost anything else. When I was 4, my mother was fed up with my stubborn refusal to eat my sandwich at lunch one day. She picked it up, separated the 2 slices, and stuck it to my face. There was a moment of complete silence as I stopped whining and evaluated what she'd done. After that we were both too collapsed with laughter to be mad at each other. This is kinda different because the punishment wasn't bad. We were visiting our cousins and then the adults decided to visit Expo 88. I really wanted to go, but for some reason everyone else went except me and my cousin the same age. Before they left for the day they told us don't go riding your bikes up and down the street, and don't go lighting fires. Well, the first thing we do when they left is to go riding the bikes up and down the street. It was more like a steep road, and we would go to the top and coast down to see how fast we could get. Next thing was to take up some leaves and play with fire. Anyway, they come home and somehow know about the riding the bikes from a neighbor and also notice the burnt leaves around the yard. We got marched inside and put through the usual interrogation, and then my uncle decides we must be punished. He takes off his belt, leads my cousin into a bedroom, and shortly after I hear 3 hard whacks, each followed by loud yelps of pain. My cousin comes out, tears streaming down his face, and my uncle walks over and hands the belt to my dad, who then leads me into the bedroom. I'm petrified. He closes the door and looks at me. Son, I can't hit you with this, he grins. Just lie on the bed, and I'll hit it beside you, and you yell out and pretend it hurts. So that is what we did, and then I had to do my best impression of a crying, scolded boy when I left the room. My uncle gave dad a look like good job, and we kept that secret for years. When my cousin finally found out, he couldn't believe it. In fact, it was usually my mum who would punish us. Dad was a bit of a free spirit and probably thought it was funny we broke the rules. Plot twist. Your uncle did the same thing with your cousin. My sister and I were arguing over some cheap plastic recorder, the musical kind, like a clarinet from Heck for overtired parents. I wanted it because she wanted it. She wanted it because I wanted it. In the end, my dad walked up to us and settled it by breaking the recorder in half and handing us each a piece. We both learned a valuable lesson that day, I think. Your dad had probably been looking for an excuse to break that recorder for a while. When I was 5 or 6, deaf old enough to know better, I bit my older sister directly on the stomach. Left top and bottom teeth imprints. It wasn't something minor. Mum grabbed a dog collar and leash, then tied me to a doorknob for several hours. If you act like a dog, you get treated like a dog. I hope this doesn't awaken anything in me. I threw a ton of glitter on my brother when he was in the bathtub. My parents bought a giant bag of glitter and dumped it on my bed. They made me count it and would not give me my phone or laptop back until I did. In Catholic school, a nun made me go out back in the convent and cut her grass with a pair of scissors. My thumbs were bruised for a week and hurt for days. Not my punishment but my brother's. He was in kindergarten and often got physical with other kids by pushing them and whatnot. After being told a couple times by the teacher my dad had enough. When my brother and I got home from school he asked my brother to get his 3 favorite Game Boy games. I went upstairs as I suspected something terrible was about to happen. My mom and dad took my brother out to the garage, gave him a hammer, and told him to smash the games to bits. I could hear my brother screaming bloody murder and my dad yelling back to swing the hammer. After a couple seconds and screams I heard a ping as the hammer bounced off the plastic game laying on the concrete. Then another and yet another. I was absolutely petrified as I could hear my brother screaming in horror. He never lashed out again and I made dang sure not to misbehave as it mentally scarred me too just from hearing it. A friend of mine recently told me that his mom used to have him kneel on uncooked rice when he did something wrong. Sounds miserable if you ask me. Very popular in old Catholic schools. Can cause permanent nerve damage. Hurts a bunch. When I was a kid, like preteen, I still often slept in my mom's king-size bed. Single parent, only child. It didn't seem that weird. Sometimes we shared. Sometimes she slept in my single, whatever, just setting the tone. At one point, she started seeing some guy and he came over unexpectedly to spend a night. She was super drunk. He probably was too TBH, and she obviously wanted me out of her bed. So, middle of the night on a weeknight, she comes rampaging up the stairs and starts screaming at me for not sleeping in my own room and threatening to beat me senseless if I don't move immediately. I'm full on sleeping at this point, not a gentle waker. I'm a grumpy, emotional preteen and she's a chronic alcoholic so our relationship isn't great. She starts making these demands and on the fight or flight spectrum I prepare for war. I don't really know the how or why of the details, but I guess the boyfriend had been on the dike earlier that day and come across, of all things, a dead heron, and being the strange, drunk man he was, rather than leave this majestic dead thing in its place to decompose as nature intended, he cut off one of its wings to bring home to my mom as some sort of trophy. Unbeknownst to me, this item became the threat she used next when I refused to relocate sleeping spaces. She truly did attempt to beat me senseless with the severed wing of a very large bird. I entered foster care not 6 months later. My parents had to get creative. The most unique for me was sleeping on a couch in our sunroom that was shared by our beagle and not being allowed to read anything. I was, and am, big into reading. You would be surprised at the sudden increase of homework assignments I did that required reading fiction. I loved reading as a kid. My father realized sending me to my room wasn't a punishment. My father is an English professor. He got good. After a while, my punishment wasn't go to my room, it was watch C-SPAN. I would have to watch politics for hours, and we would talk about it. I was one of the few, if not the only, 12-year-olds who could talk about the Senate, the House, who is trying to push through what. As a grown-up now, I'm thankful. As a kid, I was stunned. How did he come up with something so anti-useful? Bit of backstory. For many years, my mother was having an affair with a married man. Every weekend we could go to sleazy motels where my brother and I would stay in a room with his daughter while he and my mother shacked up for the weekend in another room. As a child, I was obsessed with Florida. Always wanted to go there. It was my dream. Main story. One week in the summer I was with my grandma. I was around 10. My cousins from out of town were also coming to stay. I was super excited. My mother calls me at grandma's house and the following conversation takes place. Mom, do you want to go with us this weekend? Me, where to? Mom, the hotel. Like always. Me, no, I wanna hang out with so and so. Cousins. And grandma. Mom, okay. Fast forward 1 week and she picks me up from grandma's. My little brother starts telling how they went to Florida. I think he is a dumb kid making up stories, so I tell him to shut up. No, he says, we went to Florida. My mother corroborates his story. I start to cry and ask why she didn't tell me they were going to Florida. She then informs me that her boyfriend, later husband, decided that since I would rather see my cousins and grandma than spend time with him, that my punishment was I didn't get to go to Florida. I was devastated. Yes, there's quite a long list of every kind of abuse there is. And I spent a lot of years in therapy. He is dead and I have had no contact with my mother for close to 20 years. 6 months ago I moved to Florida. I live a mile from the beach. I'm happier than I've ever been. When I was a kid and at my grandparents' place, whenever I was sick I had to swallow a tablespoonful of whiskey. Made me throw up every time. It didn't matter what the medical problem was. I got a tablespoon of whiskey. Poison ivy, whiskey. Flu, whiskey. Food poisoning, whiskey. Fell out of a tree and scraped myself up real bad, whiskey. I think I was punished for being weak. There was no winning. If grandma or grandpa suspected that I wasn't feeling 100%, they'd straight out ask me what was wrong, and I had to say something or risk worse punishments. When my dad was a teenager, if he didn't clean his room when his mother told him to, she would empty the contents of his room onto the front lawn for him to discover when he would get home from school. Not sure how unique it was, but we would always be grounded from our rooms not to our rooms. It was the worst. You don't realize how much is in your room until you aren't allowed to go in it. My parents didn't know what to do with me because I was being a prick. So they took literally everything out of my room including my bed. It was weird and I remember sitting in the corner with my teddy. I was hiding it so they wouldn't take that too. I was the firstborn so they've learned. Essay writing. My dad is a graduate school professor and he made us write essays about what we had done wrong, why it was wrong, and what we should have done instead. We had to cite sources and use outside information research. My dad would then read and correct the content and grammar of the essays until they were deemed satisfactory. We were basically grounded until the essay was complete and considered good enough. The worse the punishment, the longer the essay and the harder he critiqued it. For example, you left the dishes in the sink after being told way too many times. Pretty soon you were writing a short essay about germs and proper food handling, etc. I remember specifically getting caught drinking in the garage when I was 16. My dad was peed and I had to write a 20-page essay about what the consequences of teenage drinking were to my 16-year-old brain. How much legal trouble I could have gotten into, and how much legal trouble my parents could have gotten into for allowing teenage drinking. Huge pain. But it got us thinking about topics we usually didn't think too in depth about, and it was better than having my parents yell and scream. Usually by the end of the essay writing process both parties would have chilled out and a calm discussion would follow. In elementary school we had this one really strict teacher that would make us T-pose in the back of the room if we were being disruptive. Every one of us scoffed at the idea until about a minute in and your arms are killing you. Very effective punishment. In my birth family the only punishment other than being spanked with a hairbrush was the silent treatment and shunning, and it was terrible. Because we were never told what we had done wrong, or even what the rules were, we would have to silently guess what rule we had broken. There was no prize for guessing right, and the silent treatment could go on for days or longer. It was bad because it made me really jumpy, made it hard for me to trust people, and because I then had to teach myself how to speak up instead of sulking to communicate. I created a dummy and put it in my bed, then snuck out the window. When I got home the dummy was still there. I started dancing and celebrating. Then the dummy popped up. It was my dad. Nearly shat myself. Then he made me dig up the septic tank the next morning. Still the scare was what got me. I was a 16-year-old girl. We had 4 cats. It was my job to care for them because I wanted them. But I'd often forget to clean the litter boxes and make someone else do it because it stunk and it was gross. Especially when one of the cats was sick. I'd been warned about it a couple times, but kept doing it. One day when I was at school, my mom moved all the litter boxes into my bedroom. She replaced the litter with the kind that doesn't reduce odor at all. She specifically told me I was not allowed to open windows and I had to sleep in there. Couldn't go sleep on the couch. Oh my god. It doesn't sound like much but it was so bad. I'd rather be spanked. It lasted for a week before she let me move them back out into the laundry room again. Swallowing a tablespoonful of Tabasco sauce. standing in the corner for 2 hours with a paper bag over my head, being allowed to eat only mashed potatoes with cod liver oil mixed in. When I was younger and I swore, my mom would put a pickled jalapeno in my mouth and make me stand in the corner. If I swallowed the jalapeno, she would make me eat the entire jar. She also had the tendency to trash my room and make me clean it, like flip the mattresses, drawers, all the closet shelving, everything. So then I'd clean it and she would promptly reshed my room and make me clean it again. Rinse repeat 3 or 4 times. I'd be dehydrated from crying, and still to this day I never really understood why she did it. I'm still bitter enough about it that if I asked today, I'd probably cry. I've never heard of anyone else being punished by being forced to put their nose on the wall for what seemed like an eternity. I'd rather take and butt hoop in any day. Not the wall, but a chalkboard with a dot drawn either just high enough to where I had to constantly be on my tiptoes to reach it, or really low to where I had to squat down. That was the worse than a quick butt whooping for sure. My mom made me write "I will not talk to" back to my mom. I believe it was 500 times. I couldn't write the sentence one word at a time, making columns with the words to get it done fast. She made me write the full sentence out one at a time. After I was done, I gave it to her, and she looked the papers over and tore them up in front of me. My mom was always taking my books away because I'd read instead of doing my homework. Also, my mom would go through the trash and punish me based on what I ate. In middle school, my parents took all my makeup away from me because I hated leaving the house without it. I got a C in math in 8th grade and there was nothing left to take away, so my parents decided I would move in with my dad and go to a different high school than all my friends as a punishment. I'm 22 and have been paying my own phone bill for 4 years, but my mom still tries to take my phone away from me if she feels like I'm on it too much. Bro, you need to move TF out. I desperately wanted to order WrestleMania. I was a massive Hulk Hogan fan. Well, I was acting like a little crap and wouldn't stop. So, my dad ordered the WrestleMania pay-per-view. He sat in the living room and watched it and made me sit in the other room where I could just barely hear it but couldn't see it. He watched the whole dang thing and didn't let me move or ever see the screen. It was just effing brutal. My little brother and I got into a fight at school. Our dad bought some grout cleaner and found old toothbrushes and made us scrub the grout in the room the dogs slept in. Joke's on him, we had already made up and had a great time not doing homework or yard work, though we were sore the next day. Mum always told us not to use too much ketchup because we always ended up wasting a lot. One day I went overboard with the ketchup, again, and she made me eat all the ketchup I didn't use with a spoon. Very effective. My father heard about using hot peppers as punishment instead of spanking, and he'd make me bite into it and hold it in my mouth, and I remember just crying and crying at the bathroom sink trying to wash it out. Alone this wasn't terrible, but now I can't stand eating anything spicy. I honestly don't understand what other people find enjoyable about it. It's just degrees of pain to me. Like, yeah, that sauce is only mildly painful compared to a sauce that's super painful, so I can force it down, but I'd like it more if it wasn't painful at all. Parents would lock the computer with a password that required me to go to the library and research random bits of information, such as, the password is the capital of Kazakhstan. It mainly made me waste hours of each day before I could even do my homework. I don't remember any of the passwords they made me look up. My dad was extremely abusive. My mom was the gentlest soul. She never punished us and we loved her. Her form of punishment was just talking to us and telling us what we should do instead and why. And it worked. Anyways, once she told me to stand in the corner. I was probably 8. This woman had never punished me in my life, so I was shocked. I obeyed but started to cry in the corner. She felt so badly that she came over and held me and said, "It's okay. I love you and I don't want you to be sad. I'll stand with you." I stood my 5 minutes with her at my side, fell even more in love with my angel mother, and never disobeyed her again. When I was in 2nd grade, I made a comment to my mom about how I always seen on TV that the mom cooks and cleans while the dad sits on the couch all day, but in our family, it was the opposite. My dad was also the sole breadwinner of the family. This did not sit well with my mom. She took away all of my clothes, locked me out of my bedroom, made me sleep on the hallway floor for a while, and would drop me off on the side of the road after school and tell me to walk home. My dad had to take me to the store to get new clothes with my life savings, which at 8 years old was $60. This was in the name of showing me all that she does for me. When I was around 16, I told this to a counselor and they informed me this is abuse and my parents would have been arrested if I had told any of my teachers. I loved gardening as a kid, but I could not control the hose as I was just 6 or 7. So I splashed some windows on accident that my mom just cleaned. So she wrapped the garden hose around my neck like a noose and put on the water. Almost strangled me to death and I had neck pains for weeks. My mom used to take away my CDs, so I couldn't use my portable CD player. As an emo teenager who would angst out for hours to My Chemical Romance, this was the worst kind of punishment. I have a couple. Because I was short, at the age of 8, my guardian told me that I needed to grow taller, but since I couldn't I don't think I can grow taller just by thinking about it. She made me jump every day and reach for the door frame. She justified it because NBA players are tall, and they jump. So if I jumped, and pretend to dunk a basketball, I will grow taller. I also took piano lessons. I would practice for 2 hours a day, every day. When I would mess up on one song, note-wise or speed-wise, I'd have to play 2 more times. One time it added up to the point that I needed to play the piece over 200 times. I refused to spend my whole day playing it. So my guardian took my piano book and locked me outside of the house for an hour. This one might be common, but whenever they didn't like my behavior or my actions in general, they'd confiscate all of my electronics and turn off the Wi-Fi. That one hurt the most. We had to write papers. You hit your brother? Write 2 pages on why violence is wrong. You disobeyed? Write 2 pages on the necessity of listening to your parents. You are mean? Write a page on the importance of kindness. You didn't clean your room? 3 pages on why you should obey first time told and why organization is important. Suffice it to say that I made it through college quite easily because I could BS a paper in no time. Shower hour. Our schools had the online grade lookup, so whenever a 0 was posted for any assignment, we had to sit in the shower for 1 hour. This was for each 0, every day, till that 0 was taken out of the grade book. Obviously the water wasn't on. You just sat in the bathtub with your school books and no phone, no music, no company, etc. I only had to do it once or twice, but my brother and sister had to do it much more often. It was recommended to my parents by our family counselor. I thought I was a badass at 15 and snuck a bottle of Hennessy into my room. I hid it in the closet and would drink some with my friends after school. Well, my mom decided to clean my room randomly and found the bottle. When I got home, my dad made me sit down and put the bottle in front of him. He then put out 3 glasses and called my little sister, 13, and brother, 11, and told them to sit with me. He then poured 3 glasses of Henny and told me to serve it to my siblings. I said no way, and he asked why not, and I said because they're too young, to which he replied you are too, so he made me pour everything down the sink. To this day I never bring alcohol to my father's house. That psychological punishment stuck with me for life. More unique in its execution. Parents took away my PS2. I looked all throughout the house trying to find it when they were out to even play a little bit. Bastards stashed it under my bed. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.